What do we know about Stanford? We're 8 days away from the season. If TCU is good, is this a team they should just take care of business against? We'll talk about that and more next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also find us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're free and available, wherever podcasts are available. And appreciate you making the show your first listen. So we're about a week away from the first game of the season. TCU is going to take on Stanford in Palo Alto. 9:30 Central Time kickoff on a Friday night. So late night, get your coffee ready, all those things. But I want to start getting into what are we going to see from Stanford. And, of course, last year TCU had a huge challenge with Colorado because that was a team that you didn't have any film on. They had all these transfers. Deion Sanders was the new head coach. We know how they handled it, not particularly well. But a new season, a new fresh start, going on the road, playing an ACC opponent on the West Coast, as funny as that is to say. And I feel like people haven't paid a lot of attention to Stanford over the past few years because they've been bad. For a long time, this was one of the most consistent programs in college football. TCU last played them in the Alamo Bowl and won that football game. Whether it was Jim Harbaugh or then David Shaw, you knew what Stanford was about. They were going to run the football. They had a good track record of putting quarterbacks in the NFL, had a good track record of putting running backs in the NFL. They were physical, good offensive lines, great trench play, defensively solid, fundamentally sound. We're going to come at you and really try to impose their will on you. This is a pretty different Stanford team. Troy Taylor, who's in year 2 of what he hopes is a rebuild, coming over from Sacramento State, their offense, they're not lining up fullbacks and a lot of tight ends up there anymore. It's more of your traditional kind of spread, 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, trying to get the ball to the outside, hurry up offense. So it might not be the Stanford team that you're accustomed to seeing when TCU plays them in a week, but this is what they did last season. They went 3-9 last year. So they weren't great. They're over under this year from a win total perspective is 4 games. And so I remember at Big 12 Media Days back in 2014, Gary Patterson, his opening statement, said something about returning production because Stanford is the number 1 team in the country when it comes to returning production. They've got a lot of players that played for them last year. And GP goes up to the podium and he says, well, the good news is everybody's coming back. The bad news is everybody's coming back. And what he was getting at was they had a lot of returning production, but the previous season they were 4-8. So it was a lot of guys that weren't super successful the year before. Now, we know the story with that team. They go on to have an incredible season, win a Big 12 title, win a Peach Bowl, should have been in the college football playoff, but we don't need to rehash that right now. I'm not predicting those things for Stanford. This is a fascinating team, though, because they don't have high expectations. But typically, there's not a better indicator of success and progress in college football than players getting older and maturing within your system. It's different now with the transfer portal because you have that element to it as well. And Stanford's a team that so far in the transfer portal era has really struggled because a lot of guys leave, but it's difficult for them to get guys to come in because of the academic requirements that are there at Stanford. So they don't have the same flexibility and the same pool, I guess, to choose from that a lot of schools do. But Troy Taylor's trying to make this work. And as far as players that stand out, and the biggest name on this football team is a wide receiver in Alec Aomenor. He had 62 receptions for 1,013 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. And Aomenor, he had his biggest game against Colorado. 294 yards on 13 receptions, 3 touchdowns. And that was against a good secondary led by Travis Hunter. He's one of the best players in the country. And that was a crazy game. Stanford fell behind 29-0. Looked like Colorado was going to cruise to a victory. They were 1-4 at the time. They come back. They end up winning the football game. and A.O. Maynor had a huge hand in that. And he was continued to be productive across the season. I mean, that wasn't a fluke performance against Colorado. He didn't get to those heights again, but he had 122 yards against Oregon State on 3 catches, 146 yards on 9 catches against Washington, 90 yards on 8 catches against UCLA. So he was super productive week after week. And a problem for TCU, at least we think early in the season, could be corner. You lost some starters there. One ready-made starter and certified starter in Avery Helm, another guy in Vernon Glover who's going to rotate in. So somebody's going to have to cover Alec one-on-one at times. We've heard that's something Andy Avalos wants to do. He wants to put his corners in more press coverage situations. So whether that ends up being Lamarian James, it might be Travis Broughton, somebody's going to have to go head-to-head, one-on-one with A.O. Maynor, and he's a really good wide receiver. Kevin Borba, who hosts Locked On Buffs, the Colorado podcast, and also does a lot of work for Athlon Sports, he went as far as to say that he's a top 10 wide receiver in college football. So with some shuffling around in that room because of injuries, and also the fact that you just lost your corners coach in Carlton Buckles, at least temporarily, he's going to step away from the program. That's something to watch. He's going to have to find a way to keep him in check and minimize big plays this next week. Ashton Daniels most likely will be the quarterback for the Cardinal. He started pretty much every game last season. Now he's been technically in a QB battle this offseason with 4-star recruit Elijah Brown, but given the fact that he played so much last year, I would be willing to bet that Daniels is going to be the guy. Dual threat quarterback, threw for 2,247 yards last year, 58% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 8 picks. He was sacked 27 times. He ran for 296 yards on 110 carries. So he's able to run the ball a little bit too, but pretty active in the pocket. Can make a lot of throws. Experienced player. He's another one to watch. At the running back spot, they're kind of in the same position as TCU in that there's not really much returning production at all. The most returning production they have at that spot is Cedric Irvin, who had 26 carries for 113 yards this past season. But Stanford's offensive line last year really struggled. They got 41 sacks. They were 103rd in the nation with just 3.5 yards per carry in the run game. So they weren't able to run the football effectively. They gave up a lot of sacks. So you would hope that means that TCU, with a new, more aggressive defense and with a bigger emphasis on disrupting plays, creating havoc, and getting the quarterback, that this is a game that they can show that with all the different looks that they're going to give this O-line. So that's going to be a huge key for Stanford's season, but especially in week 1. What's the offensive line going to do? Defensively, Stanford was really bad on that side of the ball last year. They ranked 129th in the country, allowed 461 yards per game. They allowed the most passing yards in the country. Now, they do have some returners. Linebacker Tristan Sinclair, their leading tackler, is back. Colin Wright, a good corner, will be playing for them again this year. Bobby April is their DC. He'll be in year 2. And he says the team just needs to kind of get back to fundamentals, similar to Andy Avalos talking about, it's tackle football. Got to get guys on the ground. Got to do those things better this upcoming season. As far as transfers go, some names to know that are coming in. Josiah Galvin from Northern Iowa. He's a linebacker, middle linebacker. Clay Patterson, edge rusher from Yale. And then Jay Green, a corner from Washington. Those are the big names on defense that'll be coming in and playing for Troy Taylor this upcoming season. So offensively, a chance to sort of set the tone and get some momentum and a good impression going into the season by doing well here and being able to, score consistently on a defense that really struggled last year. Week 1's always a toss-up. You never really know what's going to happen. You wonder about motivation. Now, this TCU team should be plenty motivated. Kind of a weird schedule on a Friday night on the West Coast. I don't think it's going to be a packed house. I'm sure there'll be fans there, but that's not a fan base that just packs out the stadium on a consistent basis. Maybe there'll be more juice for a season opener, even though it's on a Friday. TCU's going to have to find a way to bring their own energy, though. and make things happen. I think ultimately, if they can contain Ayo Maynor on the outside, limit Ashton Daniels, ability to create plays with his feet and get the ball down the field, and if the offense can be efficient, run the ball well against a Stanford defense that really struggled to stop that last year, then they should have advantages in this ball game. And this should be a ball game that if they're a good football team, they win comfortably. Now, a few years ago, they went up to Colorado on a Friday night and kind of sleptwalked through a first half. Darius Davis punt return for a touchdown was the only scoring. And then they locked in. They got into a rhythm running the football. Chandler Morris went down. Max Duggan comes in. And they pulled away comfortably late in that game. They also sort of leaned on their defense to stabilize things when the offense was struggling early in that contest. But you don't want a slow start in this one. Like, get out to a lead and try to set the tempo and set the tone of the game and the season by being physical and winning at the point of attack. But that's kind of a brief look at Stanford. I'm trying to get a guest on next week, talk more in depth about them, and we'll have more breakdowns on specific players as we get closer to game day. But we're only a week away, so we're almost there. When we come back, TCU is naming their team captains for the upcoming season. I'll give you that information. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Ibotta, if you want to earn cash back with what you buy, you're having to spend on all kinds of things right now. School's back in session, right? You're buying school supplies. Oh, man, I forgot my kid needs a special type of water bottle or this pencil case or whatever the situation is. Ibotta allows you to get cash back on all your purchases. It's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, earn on hundreds of items from groceries, beauty supplies, even toys. You can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying their app by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use that code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $5 for free. Go ahead and do it today. We've got team captains for the upcoming season. Frogs have named 5 team captains for the year. Josh Hoover, starting quarterback. You would expect that to be the case. Bud Clark, Chase Curtis, Johnny Hodges, Brett Matisic, and Savion Williams. 6 captains for the upcoming season. Make your joke about TCU education here. 6 captains for this year. All those names you probably know. The one you might not is Brent Matisic, who is a long snapper for the team. And that's really cool that he got that recognition. Special teams guy, doing his job well, making an impression on his teammates. A lot was made last year about Chandler Morris not being a captain on that team. And at the time, I didn't think a lot about it. But obviously, you want your quarterback to be a leader. I've said this before. It did feel like, for whatever reason, I don't know the behind-the-scenes situation that was happening, the team responded really well to Josh Hoover when he got the job. When he took over for Chandler after he went down with an injury, I mentioned there was Fort Worth Star-Telegram story last week about how in the Texas game at halftime, the coaching staff was meeting and talking about, hey, this game's kind of gotten away from us. Should we give Chandler a chance to get back in there and take some snaps, see if it can sort of jumpstart this offense or give it a spark? And they eventually decided to stick with Josh. And for Chandler, apparently that was kind of the moment where he was like, all right, writing's sort of on the wall. I'm going to have to move on. But Josh came out there and played really well in the second half, gave TCU a chance to win. And I just remember, like, even in the Texas Tech game where he threw a pick late in that ball game that ended the opportunity for a rally, offensive line was hanging around him, trying to lift him up, trying to encourage him. It just felt like the team had his back, that they wanted him to be there, be their guy, and that was a big part of the second half of the season. So I'm not surprised that he's the captain. He said all the right things. It appears that he has all the intangible qualities you would want from your quarterback, but it's nice to see that your QB got that title from his teammates. Bud Clark, super fun player. I hope it's a bounce back year for him. I'm hopeful that Andy Avalos in this defense will be a good change. But Bud, this will be, third or fourth year starting, chance to really leave his college career on a good note. And with his athleticism and ability, I do think there's a chance that he could play on Sundays if he can put together a good season this upcoming year. Savion Williams makes sense. Savion's a guy that we all expect to have a big year. I think he's going to be the number one target for this offense. Dalen Wright, Eric McAllister, also on the outside, are going to be factors as well. J.P. Richardson in the slot, who was your leading receiver last year and I think could end up leading the team, at least in receptions again this year, just because he's such a good security blanket for Josh. But Savion is the dude. I mean, if this offense is successful, and I think especially if this offense has a vertical passing attack, a lot of that's going to fall on his shoulders. And one thing we've heard this offseason from coaches is they're trying to find ways to get the ball in his hands creatively. And I mentioned last year, I really liked it when they would throw a bubble screen out to him, because just with his size, and he had an angry streak when he was running the football. He'd put his head down, put his shoulder down, get a couple extra yards. He was rarely brought down on first contact. So it was almost always a positive play. And in a lot of ways, you saw him moving the chains doing that. So they've apparently given him some opportunities in the backfield. I'm intrigued by that. And I know, like, down near the goal line last year, they tried to use him on some jet sweeps and that type of thing. I'm not real interested in that aspect of it, but getting him the ball on the outside and in different formations and in different ways, I think it'd be super beneficial for this offense. Johnny Hodges looking to have a bounce back year. Again, another guy who hopefully will really benefit from Andy Avalos in this new defense. He struggled to cover players in space, but you don't have to constantly put him in those situations. And hopefully the new coaching staff can find ways to accentuate and show what his strength is, which is coming downhill, making plays at the point of attack. And there were still times last season, the Houston game stands out to me, where his physicality made a huge difference and his ability to come up and stop the run. You have to stop the run to be a successful defense. So there's a place for Johnny Hodges. It's just about finding the best role for him and knowing how to use him in this defense. And that's going to be a huge key for TCU and for this defensive coaching staff as they get into year one of a new scheme. And then Chase Curtis, that's a name people need to know. Drake Dabney is going to be the headline guy at tight end, and he's your starter. And he had a productive year at Baylor last year. I think he's going to be really good for TCU. I hope they use him in the middle of the field more. Always felt like Jared Wiley was a little underutilized, and I'm expecting Jared to go on and do good things for the Chiefs this year. But at that tight end position, you want a big body who's athletic and can go get the football. And Chase Curtis, he showed some promise last year before getting injured and being done for the season. And honestly, sort of forgot about him during the course of the offseason. But he's going to have a chance to make a big impact for TCU this year. So Chase Curtis named a captain. That's really cool as well, along with Brent Matisic, the long snapper. So Josh Hoover, Savion Williams, Bud Clark, Chase Curtis, Brent Matisic, and Johnny Hodges. Those are your captains for this upcoming season. Those guys are going to have to lead the charge and sort of reestablish the culture. Sonny said they struggled last year in that aspect of player leadership. It just wasn't there. And he blamed the coaching staff for that, but the players didn't really set the tone as they should have. So hopefully that changes this upcoming year. We'll come back and get some of your thoughts before we wrap up for the day. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Got a new game for you that's really cool. Excited about this sponsor. Super pumped to try out this game myself. On your phone, go to the Google Play Store or the App Store and check out this brand new mobile game that you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's an amazing game and simulation where you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the TCU Horned Frogs? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Can you handle the pressure? Here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays during the game. Your strategy not only determines the success of your football season, but will shape your future and legacy of this program. It's a completely free game, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want when you want to. And, of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Horned Frog fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will give your team a strong start. Download the game and visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy and do it today. So in yesterday's episode, I talked about the shakeup on the corners coach side of things. So Carlton Buckles, cornerbacks coach for the Frogs, he's having to take a leave of absence for personal reasons, which not ideal timing as we're about a week away from the season. But Julius Brown, who was the corners coach at Washington the last few years, he's going to step in. And also Julius Lewis, former corner at TCU, who was a GA and was with that position group all fall camp. They're going to kind of work together and try to fill the shoes this upcoming season. But I also discussed Oklahoma State. They're doing this interesting, intriguing idea this next year. They're going to put QR codes on the back of all their players' helmets. And they're going to allow fans, if they feel led to do so, to scan that QR code during the game. And they can donate to the general NIL fund, or they can donate to specific players. And so I ask you guys, as TCU fans, would you donate to TCU players live during the football game? Tebow says, no, I would not give like that. And a lot of you said this. I'm kind of surprised. Tanner McKinney says, no, these schools and the NCAA made NIL so they can responsibly cover it. If the player set up a private signing or he sells his own merch, that's different. Vince Pryor says, what in the world? No. If you fumble the ball, I'll tip you $5. Stomp on the quarterback's helmet for $500. Tipping players in the game is a troll. It's not a good idea. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see myself – I don't know how practical it is, and I think there's going to be some bumps in the road. But I could see myself, if Savion Williams made a big play, say, you know what, brother, let me throw you some cash. I think it's a cool out-of-the-box idea. But you guys disagree with me. Matthew Welker says, can we donate and get the old jerseys back? Kidding aside, imagine the NIL money Max would have gotten a few years back. Yeah, that's a good point. Man, and I hate to bring up this game because I know it has a lot of bad memories for TCU fans, but if you had a QR code on Max's helmet when he was, laying his guts on the line in that Big 12 championship game, I feel like he probably would have gotten some money from Frogs fans in that moment. But okay, that's why I love to throw these things out there, because I don't always know what you guys your thought process is, and so you're not a fan of this one. That's fine. Duly noted. We'll move on to the next thing. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. My friend Matt Jennings will join me. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day.